Greetings Virtual Wanderers, Aeon's here. If you've been keeping up with the releases from last year, then you probably know Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was definitely one of the best. Not only was the gameplay amazing, but it also has one of the biggest and most realistic open worlds we've seen in a long time. The world is full of huge landscapes, dense forests, and towns that actually feel spot on with that medieval feel. On paper, this is the kind of open world people have been asking for. But after spending some time in it, I kept asking myself a really uncomfortable question. Am I really exploring, or am I wandering meaninglessly? And this isn't just about one bad game, but what I'm trying to say is that even great open worlds run into this problem. So the real question is, why does exploring open worlds sometimes feel boring now? And this is where a game like Starfield comes in. In the trailers, it offers almost infinite exploration, with entire planets and what seems like endless space, at a massive scale. But once you actually start playing, you realize how little of that scale translates into meaningful discovery. You usually land on a planet, walk for minutes at a time, and mostly find the same things repeated over and over again. Starfield didn't invent this problem, but it makes it painfully obvious, especially when games like Kingdom Come are slightly guilty of it too. Open worlds keep getting bigger, more detailed, and more impressive. So are modern open worlds just badly designed, or are we just playing them wrong? Let's zoom out and talk about what's really happening. When you think about it, open world maps are supposed to pull you in. They're supposed to make you curious about what's over the next hill, but more and more often, they do the exact opposite. The core problem is simple. It's the way game devs have been designing their maps these days. Great open world games are all about what you can find or do while you're exploring the world. If it's not actually rewarding to go out of your way to walk off the main path and find something, then what's the point? And even worse, if you make the map twice as large but you don't double the amount of interesting activities, systems, or rewards, all you've really done is stretch the same content even thinner. And that's what most games have done nowadays. So you end up riding, walking, or fast traveling through massive stretches of land where nothing happens.
Boring!
In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you'll mainly just be walking and riding horses. I know there's random events here and there, but after 40 to 60 hours of gameplay, going from one quest to another is nothing short of a long walk. NPCs are almost non-existent most of the time. Their activities stretch out pretty thin. It's not necessarily bad design, but it's a trade-off between realism and engagement. Kingdom Come seems to prioritize a world that's realistic over constantly feeding you new discoveries. And for some, this might be really appealing. But for others, it can turn routine travel to just another long boring stroll. Quick tip from me though, you might want to sit around the bathhouse so you can eye out the finest bath maid. And this is where Elden Ring absolutely nails it. Its world is dense, vertical, and constantly rewarding. You ride for a few minutes and you almost always find something interesting. A secret boss, a hidden dungeon, an underground area, or a loot that actually changes how you play. You'll notice pretty early that if you see something in the distance, it's probably worth checking out. For most games, even when there is something to find, it's often not rewarding enough to take the short to maybe hour-long detour to explore. Most games nowadays, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, are guilty of making a Ubisoft-style world. If you haven't heard of this term before, well, Ubisoft games like Assassin's Creed are infamously known for making you go up towers to unlock extra content like revealing the map, locating side activities, and unlocking fast travel points. And following the success of Assassin's Creed 2, other games started following this structure. It doesn't sound that bad at first, but once you realize you have to do this for every region in the game, well, you'll know how much of a pain it is. And that's just one of the things game devs have the bad habit of these days. A lot of modern open worlds rely on content that looks different on the surface, but behaves the same exact way. What I mean are side quests that are practically fetch quests at their core. And while the narrative around them might be different, let's not kid ourselves. When a side quest tells you to find 10 broken twigs, when the last just told you to catch 5 rabbits, they're basically the same thing. Repetition doesn't only come from reused content, but it also comes from interaction patterns that become predictable after you've spent a decent amount of time in the game.
Bastard took every last morsel. We can't let our folks go hungry. Bring them some of our food stores, would you?
And collectibles are even worse. I'm talking specifically about those collectibles that you grab and that only add to your achievement statistics. You run across the map grabbing items that don't really change your abilities, your playstyle, or the world of the game at all. These practically are empty items that you collect, and unless you're a completionist, you probably won't even bother finding these anyway. Except for the Playboy magazines and Mafia 2. This collectible alone adds 1 minute of playtime on Steam every time I get it. So if you're into Playboy magazines, bantering about the nitty-gritty of what makes an open world fun, or an absolute chore to play, head on over to our Discord where we talk about all things open world. Links in the description. This is where older or smaller games often outperform modern giants. Think about games like Fable 2 or even earlier RPGs with much smaller maps. You learn very quickly that if you wander off the main path, something usually happens. You either find a weird NPC, a puzzle door that might lead you to a different realm, or maybe just a silver key to unlock special chests. With things like this, you'll happily explore every corner of the map. Cause I know I did. Now, I know Fable 2 didn't have the most open of areas, but it shows that the world actually reacts when you do something. But there are some modern open worlds that are decent at this. Ghost of Tsushima does this by putting you in the dark with no quest markers. Literally. When you hear shouting on the road, you turn the camera and you see Mongols harassing villagers. Naturally, you step in, deal with them, and free the villagers. And instead of just getting some generic reward, one of them tells you a rumor. And the thing is, it never asks you to step in. You just feel like the game's nudging you to do so. Cause, well, it feels rewarding. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does something similar, just in a slower, more grounded way. If you picklock some chests in a random house early on and get caught, they'll most definitely run to an officer to report you. Then hours later, if you go back there again, they'll question why you haven't been caught yet.
Now I'll show you. Tried to pick that lock, eh? Fucking thief.
I'm sure that looks strange, but I can explain.
I'm listening.
I was just having a closer look at the lock.
And if you do get caught later on, you'll probably end up in a pillory where you'll get shamed by people throwing random junk at you. Basically, if a game makes you feel like exploring every corner of the map is going to lead somewhere or to something, then naturally you'll be motivated to keep doing that, right? Especially if it changes something about your gameplay.
My arms are all sore. What a disgrace.
And speaking of gameplay, it's nothing without visuals. And most modern open worlds are definitely visually stunning. There is no denying that. But it sure seems like the devs only go all in on the visuals and realism sometimes, and slack off on the actual content of what's in the visuals. I guess you can cut them some slack if it's a story-based open world like LA Noire, but if it's something like Horizon Zero Dawn, then you'd probably expect something more from the open world than just pretty backdrops and paths, right? Well, the sad truth is, that there's nothing much past the stunning mechanized dinosaur-filled world. Once you step off the main paths, the backdrops start to crack. The world looks incredible, but it doesn't really do anything. You move through these massive, detailed environments, but interaction usually boils down to fighting enemies, grabbing resources, and moving on. And even then, there's not much of those either. So exploration rarely leads to anything genuinely surprising. At that point, it starts feeling less like an open world and more like Forspoken's map.
I just move shit with my freaking mind!
And this is where realism turns into an excuse. The world is realistic, so it's empty on purpose. But realism should be the foundation of the content that you can actually do inside it. As our Lord and Savior Gaben once argued during Half-Life's 25th anniversary documentary, realism itself isn't automatically fun. He basically questioned why something being realistic should even matter if it doesn't make the experience more interesting or engaging for the player. Visuals can hook you, but they can't carry exploration alone. And once the wow factor fades, you start asking the same question every time you wander off the path. Why am I even here? You might not believe it at first, but open world design is built around psychology, and once you start noticing it, it's kind of impossible to ignore. You know, when you explore the game's world and reveal a new part of the map, or maybe tick off an icon off the map, or even clear an activity. Games sometimes give you a completion visual, a checklist, or a percentage going up somewhere. Basically anything to show you achieved something. It gives you that sense of a dopamine hit, and it feels kinda good. Even if what you just did wasn't exactly as exciting as your first Fuzz Roda. Over time, this makes you stop exploring because you're curious of what you'll find or get. It makes it more like you start exploring because your brain wants that next little hit. And that's not it, because with how most games are designed lately, more Ubisoft roast incoming, it gives this kind of fear of missing out on side content kind of feeling. I don't blame you for falling for it though, because every time you open your map, it's flooded with icons. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, well, does a bazillion question marks, collectibles, activities on a map sound familiar? Even popular modern games are guilty of doing this as well. If you look at Marvel's Spider-Man, although it is a good game, it follows the Ubisoft style game design, where every activity is just a bunch of checklists on the map. Once you unlock a tower, the game tells you exactly where to go in the world, and once you activate it, well, you just start becoming a sheep and just do the activities as you're told. And the worst part is, you won't even realize it's happening.
Score. Towers are picking up all kinds of RFID signals now, including one nearby. What is that?
These things are dumbing down how we should play the game. Sometimes it makes me think, what is it about game studios nowadays? Do they just think we're all 8-year-olds? But for some people, yep, I'm looking at you completionists, they want to chase the checklists and tick them all off. Well, it's not as bad when the side content is actually worth it. But nowadays, well, let's just say a lot of doubt comes to mind. Players are forced to spend hundreds of extra hours doing extra junk just to get that 100%.
You want to get anything done in the Terminus range? You're gonna end up working with the Augurs.
With all that being said, what makes modern open world games worse nowadays isn't just one thing. It's the overall design that gives you an illusion of being engaged. This is where things get interesting. AAA studios, or even quadruple A studios for the studios that think they're better than everyone else, often design their games to have big maps, and do that to flex their budget. Bigger worlds do look impressive in trailers and store pages. They basically sell the ambition, but most of the time, that big map you see in the trailers doesn't actually house any meaningful content inside of it. Now here's where it takes a turn. AAA studios might have just unintentionally left a gap that indie games can actually fill. And while indie games can't compete in size, They can definitely compete in making their worlds way more detailed than the AAA junk that's out nowadays. Games like Hollow Knight prove that a smaller world packed with intention feels infinitely more explorable than a massive one filled with barely anything. Every corner in the game actually matters. Every shortcut changes how you move, and every discovery you find actually alters your understanding of the world. The point is, the devs behind Hollow Knight made sure that they didn't waste a single space in the game with any bloat. And that's how most successful indie studios have designed their open world games. They didn't start making a big map, but they started small and filled it to make it feel bigger and expanded it whenever it felt too crowded. That is just one example, of course. I know a lot of people haven't really played indie games, so I will say this. If you start playing indie games, you'll be surprised at how well they design the way you explore in the game, even getting you hooked to keep playing. So if you're a AAA kind of person and haven't been playing any indie games, you might want to start getting on them. I promise you that it'll give you an experience that a AAA can't give. Well, at least the AAA slop that's been out anyway. But if you're an avid indie enjoyer, go in the comment section and share your favorite indie open world gems that you think some people might not know about. So when you really think about it, the problem with modern open worlds isn't that they're too big, it's that they're big without a reason. Size on its own doesn't create exploration, detail on its own doesn't create curiosity, and realism on its own definitely doesn't create engagement. What actually makes exploration work is meaning. It's knowing that when you go off the main path, something might happen, something might react, something might change how you play, or how the world sees you. If that trust is gone, exploration stops being exciting and starts feeling pointless. And you also know that even the better open world games can still fall into the same trap. Some corners of the best games still feel like they're just there for extra space. I mean, well, no game is perfect, I guess. So maybe the question isn't why open worlds are boring now. Maybe the real question is why developers keep choosing to focus on size over content, even when we have so many examples that show that it doesn't damn work. At GameTyr, we don't judge open worlds by how big the map is. We judge them by how much changes when you step off the path. And until more games start designing for that, exploration is going to keep feeling like wandering instead of discovery. But then you might be asking, so which open world game does exploration the best? Without a doubt, Skull and Bones from Ubisoft. Okay, jokes aside, we think Red Dead Redemption 2 is among the best. If you want to know why, we did a whole video about it, so you might want to check that out. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you know what to do. And if you didn't, well, maybe you were just exploring this video for that dopamine hit. Either way, that's it for now, and until then, happy exploring.